Good evening, everyone. I hope you're all safe and well, and you're all very welcome to week 2 of the Leitrim Coaching and Games Workshop Wednesdays. I hope you all enjoyed Brendan and Stephen's presentation last week. I know for me as a coach, I took an awful lot of fantastic information both out of the presentation and the Q&A session. Well done to both. Firstly, I would like to thank Andrew Murphy, Lead Strength and Conditioning Coach with Connacht's Rugby Academy, for his time, his presentation and his help throughout this workshop. Tonight's workshop is Youth Athletic Development, Conditioning for Success. So what we're looking at tonight is, are we as coaches looking at the data, looking at the demands of the game and executing our training sessions to ensure that our players are performing to their peak each time they go on the pitch. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Andrew and speak to you all soon.
Hi everyone, how are you? First of all, I'd like to take the opportunity to thank Leitrim GAA for giving me the chance to do this presentation. And then second, and probably most importantly, I'd like to thank you, the listeners, for choosing to listen in, and just hoping that you get something out of today's presentation. So Leitrim GAA, they've asked me to give a quick background on myself. So a background on myself was, I first started coaching about 19 years ago, I'd say, close enough to the month. I got involved with my local GAA club, under 10s, Killadangan GAA club in Tipperary. From there, I had coached for a couple of seasons, mixed GAA, a little bit of coaching in soccer, and then would have really progressed to pursuing my coaching in soccer. So initially I would have, as everyone does, go through their leaving cert and went to University of Limerick to pursue a sports and exercise science degree, with full intentions of becoming a football coach or a development officer. In my first year of college, I suppose things changed a little bit. I started to learn a little bit about the world, started to learn that there's such a thing as S&C and that you could actually make a career out of coaching the fitness or the physical side of things. Around this time, I found the sport of weightlifting, and it definitely opened my eyes in regards of what we can do. So I suppose around this time, I really kind of shifted from pursuing the idea of being an actual technical soccer coach to more along the physical side and becoming an S&C coach. So while undergoing my undergraduate degree in the University of Limerick, I would have coached various clubs, a couple of involvements in different sports, mainly around GAA, some track and field, some boxing, and would have floated around, I suppose, anywhere that would give me an opportunity to coach. In my third year of my sports and exercise science degree, I got an opportunity to go to New Zealand to work with the Chiefs Rugby franchise and also with the Waikato Rugby Union. So it was probably at this stage I probably had a fair idea that this S&C route was where I wanted to go down. So I finished up my degree and got further involved in coaching, in particular around GAA, and a huge amount of work with Limerick GAA. So around this time would have started being heavily involved with the Limerick GAA underage hurling academies, and around this time would have also started to pursue my Masters in Sports and Exercise Science. So I did a Masters in Sports and Exercise Science. I looked at the difference in physical capacities between senior inter-county hurlers, minor inter-county hurlers and senior club hurlers. And then I also examined how these changes altered or changed throughout a competitive season. Again, during this time would have got more heavily involved with some interesting projects, in particular with Leinster GAA, so would have been heavily involved in putting together their resistance training course, and then kind of around this time would have started to become heavily involved in some of the underage and development programs actually in Kildare GAA. Would have transitioned back to living around Limerick, and then I suppose the opportunity to come to teach on the actual sports and exercise science program that I was part of in the University of Limerick. So I taught on this program for a year, and then at the end of the first year, the opportunity to come up to work with Connacht Rugby Academy. So I took this opportunity with both hands, and definitely haven't looked back since. So this summer I'm 6 years working in Connacht Rugby. The first 6 months I was working with the sub academy, which would have been all players under the academy, which would be all non-contracted players. And then after this 6 month period, I got the academy role. So definitely something I've thoroughly enjoyed, and I'm still thoroughly enjoying. So Enda has posed a couple of questions and a couple of sections for me to kind of break this presentation down into, and hopefully I've catered for these, and then hopefully you might have an understanding of kind of the practices and what we run in Connacht Rugby. So the first area was around program philosophy, around in particular coaching youths. So I'm big in terms of, I suppose, when we put our philosophy together, it has to be shown in not just a nice little document that sits on a shelf in our office or in somewhere in the centre of excellence. So I think it's really important that we live this document, and it's definitely something that I hope that you would definitely see if you ever come to see any of our work in Connacht Rugby. So our programme is built around four principal foundations. So number one is all our players must master the basic movement patterns before they progress to advanced training methods. So I really feel that this is a really appropriate philosophy, and it's an appropriate way to work with the youth athlete. Number two is our developmental players should be exposed to the minimum appropriate overload required to adapt. So in terms of this, it's not just about throwing as much as we can about that young developing player. It's important that we are systematic and we think about how we're actually overloading this player. And then the second point is appropriate loading is based upon a model of mainly submaximal training through prescribed loading. So if you see any of our training that we do in our Connacht Rugby Academy, you'll notice that number one, it's all majority of it is submaximal, so you'll rarely see us with maximal loads or maximal intensities. It's all about learning the ability to apply force, learning the ability to execute the exercises, and everything we do is prescribed. So it's not a case of that the kids come in and they choose what they lift. And then the final point is just we program for the individual and the sport. So I'm just going to take a couple of moments and go through these principles in a little bit more detail. So our first one is around the idea that our player has to earn the right. So it's important for us to establish where those players are at on their actual journey of athletic development. So I suppose there's two really important things we have to know here. And for me in the Connacht Rugby Academy, one of them is very easy because we're based in the same setting as a professional team. So I know exactly where I want to get them players to be. Once I get my player in, I conduct my assessments. I can then establish a stream or a program or methodology that I can get them from where they currently are to where I want them to be. So it's really important that I have a good understanding of where the players are, because if I don't really know where they are at the moment, it's very hard for me to plan for them to get them into the future. So in terms of like if we took a simple squat exercise, for example, so if we knew exactly where we wanted to get that player long term, it might be down in our level 3, but this is could be just a little kid that we have in, has very little experience in the gym, so we might take them on a little bit of a stream. So they might start with a simple counterbalance squat to the chair, they might progress to a bodyweight squat, then they might progress to a dumbbell squat, and then eventually we might progress them onto a loaded barbell squat. So I think it's really important that when we're working with the youth athletes that we take that time to work with our players, we don't get rushed, and we allow them to earn the right. So I suppose the kids will see lots of different stuff on the internet. It'll be all over Instagram. You'll be all over Instagram, and you might see what some of the top players are doing. And it's very easy to get caught into the habit of thinking that this is exactly what this young fella needs to do. Whereas that player really needs to establish some foundational movements and get a good training base underneath them before they start chasing some of these more kind of sexy ideas that some of the more advanced players are at. Another very important principle for us in the academy is our weeks are very busy. There's a huge amount going on with our kids, and I'm sure it's no doubt similar with the players that you're working with. So all of our kids will be in full-time education. They'll also play for their club, So there'll be a huge demand on the players. So it's very important that we kind of maximise the adaptations that we're able to get from, I suppose, the more minimal cost exercises and the ones that have a little bit less stress on them, and the ones that are probably a little bit easier to recover on. Because it's very important for us to remember that it's not just S&C that these kids are going through, or it's not just rugby that they're playing. And then the final idea, definitely, I suppose it's a very strong point of mine, is we have to get a real good understanding and underpinning of quality movement with our players, because further down the line, when we talk about transfer of exercises, it's very important that our players are actually able to execute the exercises to the technical demand. Because I suppose if the technical demand or the technical requirements of an exercise aren't being met, the ability of that exercise to transfer across over into the sport probably becomes very, very limited. So this principle 2 then is definitely an interesting topic. It's one that I suppose it's very easy to think about, and think about how we overload our players, and we always think about doing more or going heavier or making an exercise harder. So I think it's very important that, in particular with the youth athlete, that we think of overload in a much broader term. So there's 4 kind of key concepts that I'd use in my overload. So I can manipulate the training effect with the range of motion. So the amount of movement a player goes through in an exercise, the speed of the execution of the exercise. So I can manipulate how quickly he's doing it. I can make him do it slower. I can make him pause in different elements of the execution of the exercise to make it more difficult, or I can make it easier. I have resistance, obviously. This is obviously the simple one, so I can actually put a little bit more load on the exercise, or in simple terms, I can take him from one leg or from 2 legs onto 1 leg in an exercise. And I suppose the one aspect that often gets forgotten about in terms of our overload, we often chase sets and reps and the amount of weight on an exercise, or how fatiguing a player finds an exercise. But I think one area that gets forgotten quite a lot is the complexity. So we can definitely overload our players in terms of complexity. So it doesn't have to be something very finite. It can actually be something about the difficulty of executing the exercises. So we can start to stream a couple of exercises together. We can put more of a bit of a coordinative demand, a bit more of a balance, more control on the exercises on our players. Principle 3 then is all of our exercises or our training is it's sub-maximal and it's prescribed loading. So the most important thing that we have in our exercises is actually meeting the technical requirements. So you often find that if players are training to failure or training with maximal loading, so the actual execution of that exercise becomes compromised, and you end up losing a huge amount of the actual training benefits. So it's very rare in our training that we'll actually train to failure. So again, we're not practicing failed reps, we're not practicing poor reps. We work through blocks of accumulation, where we'll build up the volume slowly over a period of time. Then we'll enter blocks of realization, where the volume will start to drop but the intensity will increase. And then we'll go through blocks of intensification, where the volume will decrease further and then the intensity will increase further again. Again, as I said, 90% of the time we're using sub-maximal loads, and this is with the academy player. So this is even with the player that's 19, 20, 21 years of age, could have 3-4 years of weight training under their belt, but we're still using sub-maximal loads 90% of the time. As I said, we prescribe all the loadings for strength-based activities. My job is to improve the physical capacities of these players, so I'm not going to leave it up to chance and let the young fellas to be able to be picking the weights whenever they're lifting. And I suppose the last point is probably the most important one to do with this. Strength, power and speed, they're all skills and they must be practiced as such. So I think if we're continually chasing maximal efforts on these, we end up in a situation where we just end up with thousands and thousands upon really poorly executed repetitions of what exercise our players are undertaking. Again, another part of why we use a sub-maximal loading structure is, again, that understanding of that there's a huge amount of other stressors on our players. So our players could be attending college 18, 20, 22 hours a week. They've got external commitments. Some of them might have some part-time jobs at the weekends. And again, it's a long-term approach we're taking with our players. There's no quick fixes. There's no magical card that we pull out and all of a sudden we do a really hard session and it makes a player. So it's definitely a case of layering extended periods of work upon each other over a period of time, and understanding that this is what's going to lead to them having the physical capacities to progress to the pro level, as opposed to a really hard training session or a really hard training block once in a blue moon. The final area then is our principles is we've got a program for the individual. So again, all our players that we work with are unique, and then this player's uniqueness must be at the centre of all our programming. So all our players move in certain ways, they're able to execute certain exercises certain ways, they're not able to do certain exercises because of different restrictions, whatever way they play the game. We have to understand this, so it's important that this is part of all of our programming decision. The next one then is very, very important with the youth or development players. We must know where the player is at in terms of their development stages. We must have a solid understanding of what their training age is, what that training age is consisted of, any issues that they've had along the way, or any, I suppose, wins that they've had along the way. So it's very important that we'd open lines of communication very early on with our players. We get a real understanding of where they've come from and what training that they've come through. So with the nature of rugby, so not all of our players will come through our system. So we might from time to time get some young kids that might come from Leinster, we might get some kids from Munster, we might get kids from Ulster, we get a couple of kids from the Exiles programme in England. So it's really important for me to have a solid understanding of what the players have done in the past so that we can integrate them into our programme efficiently. So again, I've probably harped on about this a lot today, but it's really important that we understand and consider everything else that's going on in the players' lives. So when I'm writing a programme, it's essential for me to know as much about that player's life as possible. So again, some of this will come from our monitoring data, but 99% of this will come from my communications and my relationship and the rapport that I strike with my players. So getting to understand him, knowing what his commitments are, and it's, I suppose, as a result of this that we can really tailor the program for the individual. I suppose then we kind of come down to the performance side of things, and everything that we do has to have a goal of increasing performance. So as an S&C coach, there's probably 1,000,001 different things that I could do. I could go on the internet, I could find 1,000,000 different programs, but I have to have an understanding and a rationale for why I do everything with my player, because the number one goal for me for these players is to increase their rugby performance. And similar enough to this is it's definitely something that I've evolved in and understanding as I've developed as an S&C coach is I really have to have an understanding of the strengths and weaknesses of the player's rugby game, because at the end of the day it's my job to help drive that performance, and it's very important for me to show that I understand what these strengths and weaknesses are, and I'm able to support the development of these in the player. The next is stages of progression. I suppose that the talk might take a little bit different of change of tact in here, and I suppose it's something I've thought about for quite a while. It's how our players progress, and I suppose in line with that, it's actually how their program progresses. So when a player comes in first day, they come in and they see me, Judge Dredd. I am the law. I kind of lay things down fairly firmly. And I suppose the goal and the purpose of this is for me to see is a player able to do what he's asked? Are they able to follow simple instructions? His program will be all filled in. He'll have very little autonomy in his program. Can be a little bit mundane for the player, but this is an opportunity for me to learn about the player, and it's an important opportunity for the player to learn about themselves. This period might last a week. This might last 2 weeks, it might last 2 months, it might last a little bit longer with a player, but it's my opportunity to get a handle on a player, know what they're like, have an idea of how they move, have an idea of how they actually respond in the environment of a team setting, and to see what they're actually able to do. I suppose then we get to the next stage where there's a little bit more input from the player. So at this stage, usually in my situation, the players here are usually having a little bit of involvement in pro life. So they might get up to do a session or two with the pro team. So the players are really starting to be involved more in the program. A couple of opportunities that we'll have for conversation will be like, what do I need to put in your program? What do we need to change in your program? what do you think about such and such an exercise? Do you like that there, or do you think we should think about moving it somewhere else? Again, a lot of these conversations still will be very suggestive by me. So in terms of a simple example, it might be a case of I watch a player do 100 kilos in the bench press, and I might go to him, that looks really good. I think you should go heavier. Do you want to go 105 or do you want to go 110? No one, as every young fella does, he's going to pick the bigger number. So in his mind, he thinks he's made the decision, but I've probably made that decision for him. So again, young fella starts to get a little bit more autonomy, a little bit more control, a little bit more input into his program. So again, we'll progress his program. So he'll start to shift from some of the basic programs. We'll increase the complexity of his exercises. We'll increase the complexity of his speed work, his conditioning work, starting to give him a little bit more control. The next stage then is probably the area where a lot of our players live, and they probably spend a lot of time here. This is where they will have regular opportunities to show themselves to the pro coaches. So it could be once a week, it could be 2 sessions a week, it could be an extended period of time that they spend up in the pro program. But again, this is definitely an opportunity for learning for the player. So it's really important here that I learn and understand what the player really wants and what's working for that player. So again, similar conversation would be like, what do you think about doing X before such session? So what do you think about doing your squats before this session, or maybe doing your explosive work after your session? Do you need to do some more speed work? So the conversation really starts to shift of what do you need to change in your program? What can I do for you? So it's very much that opportunity for the player to start taking more ownership and taking more control of his program. Again, simple example might be, rather than telling him that it looked good and he should have to go heavier on the bench press, it might be, how did that feel? Do you think you should go heavier? What do you think you should go? And then we'll have a little bit of banter forward and back around what he should pick. In terms of the menu, or I suppose the exercise streams or the program that the player is exposed to at this stage would be the full menu of the program. So at this stage, the player is getting exposed to all elements of his strength, his power, his speed, his conditioning. It's probably the biggest learning opportunity that our players will come to. And then I suppose that the final stage that comes in our program, and I suppose it's something that hit me actually hard at the start when I first started in the role, is at the end of usually 2 to 3 years, there's two places a player either goes. So they either get a pro contract, or unfortunately they go out into the big bad world. So there's usually a period here, maybe 6 to 8 months, where we're kind of in this mode of where players finding his feet with the pros. He'd have a huge amount of involvement with the pro program. He might get some senior caps, or he might be starting to find his way out of full-time professional rugby and might be starting to put a plan in place to pursue his career. And I suppose the conversation here is definitely, what can I do for you? And then I suppose I always usually follow it up with, no, honestly, what can I do for you? Because a lot of time with the young fellas, they don't really know what they want me to do for them. They often just want to be told what to do. So it's very important that we really drill down at this stage and get a really solid understanding of what I can actually do to help these players. So again, in this stage, the player would have quite a lot of autonomy, quite a lot of control over the program. They might get rep ranges, they might get weight ranges in their programs. Again, it's usually fully integrated with the pro program, or starting to get ready for their life outside of rugby. In simple terms, it's up to you now, kid. I suppose there's an interesting asterisk with this, is that sometimes the player does progress back into I am the law, and this cycle can be continuous. So it's not a case of that we always get to best friends forever and they stay there for the majority of the program. Sometimes they have to come back and experience a little bit of judge dread. The next area that Enda asked me to speak about was conditioning for the demands of the game. And I suppose it's definitely an interesting area in my practice, and it's something that I've probably been very reflective of. And it's something that I think I take a huge amount of time to think about, and how I structure and how I suppose address the needs of the game. About 2 years ago, I was set an interesting challenge actually by our head of fitness to actually review our strength and power program, in particular in relation to the demands of the game. And I suppose I went on a little bit of an interesting journey with this. I suppose in the past we would have all been this mad scientist. We'd have tested certain physical capacity. We'd have done a certain strength test or a speed test, and we'd have deduced that, oh, a player is very poor at such and such, or he's very strong at such and such, and we'd program entirely based off these physical capacities. And I suppose the further we go along in our coaching career, we realise that 60% of this time it works every time. So this works in some situations, but there's definitely better ways of doing it. So after this, I suppose I reviewed a lot of the literature, a lot of the texts on transfer to training and sports specificity, and I suppose I read myself into a dark hole, and I ended up like this poor dog with his toy trying to work at a computer. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I was reading all these classic texts about how we talk about sports specificity and javelin, sprinting, swimming, and I was thinking to myself, how the hell does this transfer across to rugby? I suppose all the other sports that I'm talking about, they're very finite. Or performances, it's 10 seconds for 100 meters, or it's 50 meters for a javelin. So it's very simple to kind of think back to our KPIs and our big rocks in terms of what we're actually looking for in the sport. Whereas I suppose rugby is a lot more complex. So I suppose I read a lot about rugby and kind of really broke it down into, I suppose, what the big rocks our rugby coaches use. So our big rocks in Connacht Rugby and in the IRFU are our big four. So there are catch pass, our tackle, our ball carry, our breakdown. In conjunction with that, then we have our PSS, which is our position specific skills. And then we have locomotion. So the ability of our players to get around the field and get into the position so that they can actually do our big four or do our PSS. So I suppose after a bit of reflection, I realised that everything that we do has to be about either driving performance in those big four, PSS, or driving around locomotion, the player's ability to get around the pitch. So I suppose I looked at the rugby tasks and I started to think, why are we doing what we're doing? So ultimately, no matter what we do in an S&C context, it's all about trying to drive and increase performance in these identified areas. So in simple terms, I got to a stage of that maybe I have an idea of what I'm doing. So what we do now, instead of thinking about such and such test or such and such score from physical capacities, what we do is we'll take our specific skills and then we'll think about how we can actually drive the performance of them as a physical quality. So a simple example would be our tackle. So if we've got our tackle, we communicate with our coaches, they talk about the player's body height being poor. So we can link that down. We can look at it. Is it due to postural control? Is it due to his hip mobility? Is it due to his triple flexion and his ability to control movement? So again, we then have streams underneath this. So if it has poor postural control, we can work through our lumbo-pelvic control series, our split stance explosive work, our ankle mobility, or our sway drills. So we really have an idea of that everything that we're doing is driving rugby performance. So again, it's coming back to that solid idea that we have a solid understanding of the why of what we're doing in everything that we do. Again, similar example would be our ball carry. So we communicate with our coaches. We talk about, what's the specific KPI that he needs to work on. It might be leg drive through contact. We can break that down into physical capacities. Is it strength? Does the player have the adequate general strength to produce it? Is it race to force development? Are they powerful enough? Or in simple and definitely in rugby terms, is it muscle mass? So is it a case of actually adding additional muscle mass to this player to enhance their ball carry or to enhance their leg drive, which will enhance their ball carry? So we're not chasing physical qualities or changes in physical stature just for the sake of it because we think it's needed for rugby. We're identifying the specific areas within the players which will actually drive performance. The final area that Enda asked me to talk about is just some of the common errors that I see in youth athletic development. So the common areas we see is definitely not making it fun, so often using it as a punishment. So we'll often see that physical exercise or normal strength and conditioning exercise are often delved out as punishment, which often leads to players associating it with actually not enjoying it. Other thing that we often see is doing stuff for the sake of it or because others do it. So we might be in a situation where one club has had a bit of success doing a certain type of exercise or a certain type of training, and then as a result of that we all copy that, and then we all assume that we're going to reach that increased performance in the sport of our choosing. Second one then is definitely something, or the third one is probably something that's definitely going on at the moment with the influx of social media, definitely with the times that we're in, and is just doing stuff because it's hard. So making things hard for the sake of it rather than maybe understanding actually what's happening as a result of what we're doing. Or the other area of this is definitely doing stuff that looks cool. So player might go onto Instagram, find their favourite player, and coach might even do it, find their favourite player, find his favourite player's favourite exercises or favourite training modalities that they're doing, and they decide to copy them. Again, we got to understand that these are youth players where we're trying to set a foundation and a development in place for these players. So it's very important that we don't get caught in the trap of kind of copying adult programs or filtering down adult programs down to a youth level. And again, not having a long-term plan and randomly doing stuff. So I think it's very important that when we speak about athletic development, that it's not just something that we think about we'll throw in for 2 or 3 weeks at the start of the season. I think it's very important that we all think about how it'll fit in a long-term development plan of the player across the season, and then potentially in the club setting, definitely how we'll progress and challenge, keep interest, and make it fun for our players over a long-term period. And again, next couple of areas is definitely something that we see in particular in rugby, and I would definitely say down at the GAA is not matching the training to the demands of the player or the sport. So we see such and such a team in their off season doing whatever, if they might be off biking, kayaking, running 10Ks or whatever, and then we assume that, if such and such at the elite level is doing this, then we must do this with our younger players. So I think it's really important that we understand the needs of our game and how we're going to address these with our athletic development. And I think this is something that Enda will definitely go into further detail in his talk. And then the final area is I think that we often progress our players too quickly. So it comes back to my first principle and first philosophy is that I think our players need to earn the right to progress onto the more advanced training methods. We as coaches often get bored and think that our players are actually bored and they're never actually getting to master what we're trying to get them to achieve. So I think it's important that we really ensure that our players get mastery and get comfortable in doing the basics before we progress them on. So that's all, folks. Just like to again thank you for the opportunity to speak, and thank you all for listening, and hope that you got something out of it. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Andrew. A fascinating look at how a coach looked outside the box to maximise the potential of his players through looking at the game demands. Thanks a million. This leads nicely into our next session, where we're going to look at, are we as GAA coaches coaching our players to the game demands of GAA, and what are those demands? Welcome back to the second part of our presentation, coaching to the physical demands of the game. This is an insight into the look at actually the different aspects of GAA and how we actually coach and condition our players to those demands. So the learning outcomes within this presentation, we're going to identify the different game demands of GAA and what are we training for. So the distances, the amount of sprints, the amount of accelerations as the game continues. Understand specific position game data. So how much distance does our corner forward, does our corner back, does our midfielder actually cover, and how many sprints and accelerations do they actually do? We're then going to look at the different categories of energy systems. So we're going to look at anaerobic and aerobic and how they affect the conditioning of our players. We're going to recognize conditioning methods So we're going to look at small-sided games and how they actually work in a training session and how beneficial they are, especially to under 13 and under 15 boys. We're then going to look at speed and the importance of speed and actually how to train speed. We're then going to look at MAS, so maximal aerobic speed. So again, we're looking at this as an aerobic and endurance based training session, especially for our under 17 lads and our older fellas after that. And then we're going to look at the understanding of what a training session may look like in pre-season and in season, using all the different methods, the conditioning methods, as we spoke about before. So when we speak about the game demands, what exactly are we talking about? In both graphics, the data has been taken here from scientific research on GAA. The references of all those papers are actually in the last slide in the presentation. So if anybody wants to go and take a look at it, please do. So in graphic A, we are looking at the average distances that teams do during a match. So that includes walking, jogging, all the different activities within the game itself, sprinting, acceleration. So as you can see, an inter-county player covers, on average, 8,815, while our youth player, which is under 18 when the data was taken, was 5,731. So at under 17, it probably is going to be slightly lower than that. So as you can see, there's a massive difference between our inter-county and our youth player, and again, even between our club player and our youth player. So again, are we aware of those distances? Are we training our players and our teams to those distances as well? So again, something to be very aware of it as a coach. In graphic 2, we're looking at the distances per playing line. So when we look at the full back line, midfielders, half forward line, there's quite a big difference in relation to the playing lines of each of the distances covered. So if we look at a full back line compared to our midfielders, we're looking at nearly 1,600 metres of a distance, of a variance. So again, are we as coaches training everybody the same? So is our midfielders and our fullback doing exactly the same running? And is it something that we should be looking at where we're trying to maximise the acceleration and speed of our fullback line to get out in front and our corner forwards to get away from our defenders and our midfielders getting box to box where they have to cover a lot more ground? So again, for ourselves as coaches, we need to be very aware of the distances each playing position have and obviously the distances that is going on in each of the games. So here we're looking at position-specific data. So in graphic 1, we're looking at high-speed running and very high-speed running from the different playing positions on the pitch. So when we look at very high-speed running in the green, we're looking at players that are actually covering speeds of greater or equal to 22 kilometers per hour. And in the yellow, we're looking at high-speed running for players that are going to be hitting speeds of up to 17 kilometers per hour. So as you can see, in our full half back line, our midfielders and our full forward line, throughout the game, on what we would say a very high speed running and high speed running, they're covering over 2,000 metres, which is quite a substantial amount of distance within a 70-minute game. So again, it's something to be very aware of, that are we training our half back line or half forward line, our midfielders together for those longer sprint runs? And then are we working with our full back line or our full forward line of those shorter, sharper runs where they're getting over the ground really, really quick at max velocity of actually getting out, winning the ball, turning the man and taking it on? In graphic 2, we looked at the number of accelerations and sprints per position. So accelerations are in red and sprints are in actual pink. So when we look at it again, we look at our position-specific data. Our full forward line and our full back line are exactly the same, which makes sense because if a player is making that dart and run out, whether it be a forward, the defender is trying to break the ball away from them, so they're simulating that movement that the actual full forward is doing. And our half back line and our half forward line, again, very, very similar. And our midfielders obviously getting up and down the field. So again, if we're looking at maximising the potential of all those players in those positions, are we training those accelerations and are we training those sprints, the numbers in the actual sessions themselves? So why not put our midfielders all together and do longer sprints and our full back line or full forward line in shorter, sharper sprints themselves? So in this slide, we're looking at the movements within the game and the actual distance covered. So we've got 2 on this. So the actual movements themselves are broken down in what an actual player does on the field itself. So backing and shuffling, so again, we'll say going backwards, facing the play and so on, are looking at 12.6%. Stationary, so just standing beside your man and no movement of the game itself, is 17.1%. Walking is 18.9%. Jogging, so that's a very low pace jog, maybe half pace, 42% of the time. Running, so within running, what we're talking about here is we're looking at high speed running, so over the 17 kilometers per hour, and then game related incidents in the game. So we'll say catching, fielding, soloing, kicking the ball over the bar. So when you look at that data, almost 78% of the time we're either stationary, or walking, or we're jogging, which actually is a surprising stat when you break it down as you're going along. So are we getting them ready for that running and that stationary off the mark really quick and the acceleration? So with that data there, I actually broke down the youth games in which we looked at the actual amount was for 5,735. So this is kind of for the players themselves. So on 43% of jogging, you're looking at covering about 2,455 metres. When we look at walking, 1,079, so 19% of the time. When we look at stationary, we're looking at when we break it down into the game itself, it doesn't make much sense on the data, but we're looking at 962 metres, so 16% of the time. So back shuffling, we're actually moving back. You're looking at 745, so in reverse, tracking your man back, watching the play. Then we're looking at 162 metres of actually game-related stuff. So let's say actually carrying the ball, tackling, kicking the ball over the bar, getting in those positions. And then we're looking at 332 metres of actually just running. So we talked about the running part in that as well. So that's jogging, maybe getting into 3/4 pace, but generally nothing more than that. So them stats are actually very surprising when you break them down within your games themselves. So again, something to be very aware of and to be cognitive of when we're actually putting our training sessions together. So within the body, there are 2 main energy systems: the anaerobic system, which means without oxygen, and the aerobic system, which means with oxygen. So within the anaerobic, there's 2 main components of that. There's the ATP-CP. Its fuel is creatine phosphate. It's a very small storage capacity. It only lasts from 0 to 10 seconds. The supply to the muscle is very, very fast. The intensity a player can work at is very, very fast. And also a GA example would be a corner forward exploding onto the ball, taking on his man and sticking it in the net. So that real explosive movements that's required in GA. Our anaerobic glycolysis system, glycogen is the main fuel. We're looking at a medium storage, and you're looking at time available from 11 to 30 seconds. Speed of supply is moderate. Intensities players can work at is high as well. So again, your GA example of that is your half back, where he's tracking the play. The half forward gives him the ball and he comes on the bust and takes it at real high speed up the field. So again, that kind of tracking and movement that the half back and the half forward does now in the game. Then the aerobic system, it's glycogen, fats and oxygen obviously is the main fuel source. The storage is large. Time available is unlimited because it's there forever. Speed of supply is slow. Players can work at moderate to high intensities, and your example of that is your midfielder. So your midfielder box to box, getting up and down the field in the modern game is so important. But also the aerobic system is very useful because it reduces the injury risk of your players, while also meaning that your players can recover quite quickly. So it's something that we can't, as coaches, not utilise within training sessions as well. So we'll speak about that later on. So when we speak about small-sided games, what exactly are we talking about? So really what we're looking at here is when we change the actual player or the pitch size in relation to how we match the game and the physical demands of the game. So that's really what we're looking at when we talk about small-sided games. Now the benefits to small-sided games, especially for the likes of 11-year-olds, under 13s and under 15s, are players develop different sort of physical capacities playing the actual game itself. So their different sizes in the pitch. So the bigger the pitch, the more aerobic they're getting. The smaller the pitch, the more speed and accelerations and agility they're getting within the actual games themselves. So on the first slide, you'll see small-sided games pitch dimensions. So you look at the different teams that you would have in different pitches. So the first red one, you're looking at your aerobic and your aerobic glycotic system of actually training when you're looking at those small-sided games. So the larger the numbers, obviously, and the bigger the pitches, the more it's going to be aerobic. The smaller the numbers and the smaller the pitches, the more anaerobic and the more intense those sessions are actually going to be. So it's really, really motivating for young kids as well when they're actually playing games. It makes it an awful lot easier. You're disguising the running, the accelerations, the sprints, the change of direction. So you're actually doing a lot of work within those games and players actually not knowing they're doing it at all. Players also get more touches of the ball, so it allows them to improve their technical aspects of football. So we'll say kick pass, hand pass, their movements within the game, their technical work and their team play as well. So it's creating an environment for the players that they're actually working on all the physical attributes that we spoke about earlier in a disguised manner, and obviously they enjoy it as well. So it's a lot easier to get fellas to play small-sided games on different size pitches than to get them to maybe do 400-meter runs or 100-meter sprints or something like that as well. So it's a really, really advantageous way of actually getting really good work, physical conditioning work into younger children. So on the second, again, you're looking at your guidelines for your small-sided games. Again, these are only guidelines, and there's a number of different research studies that have actually shown that different sizes and different times. So like it says, once the guidelines are there, it just gives us an indication of how we can actually do it itself. So there are some limitations to the actual small-sided game as well, where if the players and you don't make the area big enough, players might hide or they mightn't get as much running into it. But also, if the technical expertise of those players aren't really at a good level, it means that there's going to be an awful lot less work within the actual games themselves. So it's something to take into consideration when you're actually putting your small-sided games together. It's very, very important that you match your players to the actual games that you want to done as well, while also making sure that the numbers within the games, and using our step R model where we change the actual players, the teams, the time, the equipment, all that sort of stuff, so it enhances the games and what you want to get out of your sessions as well. So that's the importance of the small-sided games, and on the slide you can see the actual dimensions of the different pitch sizes and the different energy systems you'll be actually using within those as well. So on the small-sided games, I just broke it down into the different types that we can actually use within the actual games themselves. So kind of how long do we run our small-sided games? We can generally go from 1 to 6 minutes. Obviously one will be very high intensity and 6 minutes will be actually more aerobic work. Against the intensity that you're looking for max effort in everything you're looking to do when you're within a game scenario. So you're looking for fellas to be able to sprint, accelerate, defend, make sure that the passes are correct. So you're working all the different aspects of the performance model that we're looking for within GEA. When do you do it? Obviously, you can do it in pre-season and in-season as the games goes on. Probably more in-season when you're looking at your small-sided games where you're getting very much related close to the balls. Your pre-season probably closer coming to the games themselves, while earlier in the season you'll be doing probably a bit more conditioning work, so your pitches will probably be slightly bigger and you'll be getting a wee bit more, we'll say, anaerobic and aerobic work into the sessions themselves. So considerations is obviously the pitch dimensions, as we spoke about in the previous slide, playing numbers within those, the rules that you're actually going to do, and obviously the models that you're going to use, the step R model as I spoke about earlier within the actual presentation itself. So just some acronyms to be aware of. So ACC is just acceleration and high speed running is HSR, so just within the games themselves. So the first pitch size we're looking at the intensive work. So the demand is your high speed running. Within those is the predominant demand that we're looking at here. So your pitch size are generally 80 by 60, 10v10. So again, you can have a plus or minus on that, so you can increase one side or maybe one or two players, so you're actually looking for extra demand on the players without the player as well. You're looking at your 3-minute rest between the games that you play, and you're looking to work from 4 to 6 minutes. So again, you're hitting really good high-speed running, but you're also getting in a nice bit of aerobic work into the session as well. So the next one is the intensity, and the demand is acceleration and change of direction. So you're looking at here your smaller pitch size, you're looking for your 40 by 40. You're looking at your players 6v6. So again, you can actually plus or minus 1 or 2 within those games as well. So again, you're changing the demands of the game. So if you want one team to work a wee bit harder, or another team to actually gain possession and work more on the skill level, you can actually do that as well. So again, you're looking at your 3-minute rest, and you're looking at a 3-minute work rate. So you're looking at 1:1. So again, you're coming into your aerobic glycolytic system in what you're looking at here. So it's more anaerobic, pushing towards the aerobic part of that as well. So again, your extensive is where you're actually working both your acceleration and your high-speed running. So your pitches are slightly bigger, with bigger playing numbers on it as well. So your pitch size is generally 90 by 80 metres, but that can be extended from whatever playing zones you want to work in. Your players, again, can be 8v8, plus or minus. Again, you're looking at your 60 seconds to 30 seconds rest, and you're looking at 1 to 2 minutes. You're looking at really high demand in this. You're looking at players going at full tilt, working extremely hard on their accelerations and their high speed running. So again, you're working at high intensity levels with short works and your interval breaks to be based on that as well. So again, the pitch dimensions can change for the coaches themselves, or what you want to get out of the session. So the examples here are just examples of what you want, but more or less what demand you want out of that small sided games is very, very important. So here we have an example of a pitch breakdown for small sided games. So we've got 1, 2 and 3 pitches set out on a full size GA pitch. So on 1 here, we could be looking at a 1+, where we've got the person in pink. So you're looking at really high intensive work with 3-on-3 or 4-on-4. So you're just looking to work the ball through the cones to get a score. So again, you're making sure that the team that's defending, or the team that hasn't that extra player, is working extremely hard. And again, you're looking at short, really short, high intensity intervals for that. So again, on pitch 2, we're just looking at man-on-man, looking to get scores. Again, really high intensive, but when we get a score, or for a score to count, we must get the team across the white line. So again, you're working on high-speed running to get them across. So, and also you're looking at nearly a transition part of that game as well, where you're looking to get them past that line, and then for them to break back and defend when they're going on that as well. So on pitch 3, you're looking at all your demands in the game. You're looking at your high speed running. You're looking at getting a nice bit of aerobic work in, because the pitch size is so big, and you're also looking for accelerations and decelerations within the games themselves. So again, this is where your goalkeepers can come into play, and you play your full game. So you can actually run these games simultaneously as the session is going on, once you've got coaches in each of the actual sections of the game itself. So again, there's been research showing that when the coach is there and motivating the players and giving them encouragement, the intensity and the drive within those games actually increases as well. So it's very important that we look at our games and how we're actually looking to get our game situation off. You can add more players in, or you can take more players off, but it's very important you give the rest periods. If you're going into high intensity games, you have to give the body a time to recover, because if you don't and you keep going at really high intensities, there's a greater chance of players breaking down and picking up injuries. So again, as coaches, we need to be very aware of the actual sessions we're planning and what we want out of each of the sessions. When we speak about speed in GA, we're currently looking at max speed or max velocity, change of direction or agility, and acceleration. The 2 components we're really looking at in this presentation are max speed and acceleration. Acceleration and speed over short distances are 2 of the most important factors in elite and amateur players in competition. The ability to accelerate, perform short sprints, and outrun your opponent are key measures currently in GAA. So with this in mind, if we can't increase our acceleration and perform short sprints, we're not going to be able to win possession, we're not going to get frees from defenders, we won't be able to break through tackles, and we won't be able to get into positions to kick for scores, or more importantly, possibly get in for goal chances when we get in behind the fences. On average, 182 accelerations and sprints in a game with an average duration of 7 seconds. So this is probably the key component of getting and winning possession and actually getting in positions to scores and change the game. So a vital important part of our training sessions, and something that we need to spend some more time on for all our players. So the first one we're going to look at is acceleration. So the ability to get off the line. So when we talk about acceleration, we're talking about a standing start. So like a defender standing in front of a forward, or forward standing in front of a defender, it's static, and then you're off the mark really quick. The intensity of the effort required is obviously 100%. You must give it 100%. The general distances that we should be kind of looking at is obviously 0 to 30 meters. So that can be 5, 10, 15, 20 meters. 30 is probably a wee bit too far, because you're coming into kind of maybe max speed or max velocity after that. But anything up to those distances have been shown that can actually help in acceleration and help in acceleration speed. Now the rest periods are very important, because we go back to our energy systems. The energy systems you'll be using here generally are the ATP and the CP system. So if you're looking at getting across the ground as quick as we can, we're looking to use that acceleration and that quickness of the actual muscle fibers in the body. So when we talk about it, we're looking at a 10. So for every 10 meters, we must take 45 seconds recovery. Again, 20 meters, 90 seconds, and 30 meters, 120 seconds. So it's very important that we get a recovery, so we're able to maximize that acceleration off the line. So just a little graphic there. So the work to ratio is 0 to 30 meters. The rest is 45 to 120 seconds. Intensity, as we spoke about, is max effort. Repetitions within the actual session may be from 3 to 8 repetitions, so 3 to 8 runs, and the sets you might do is 1 to 3. But again, the most important part is that we're recovering from each acceleration that we're actually doing, because we're looking for max effort across the time. So remember, within the games, we're looking at 182 on average accelerations and sprints. So again, is it something that we're training, and is it something that we need to actually, a bit like a skill, a GA skill of kicking the ball over the bar, it is something that we need to train. So the next component of speed we're going to look at here is max speed. So again, our max velocity. So generally, in all the research that we've looked at, it generally starts from a rolling start or a light jog. The intensity, as we spoke about, again, is 100% all the time. Now within that, we have a tendency when players are sprinting, when they see the cone, they generally slow down. So we need this intensity where they're running straight through the actual cone itself, because they are going to get the recovery they're needed to do that max effort each time. The distance are generally from 10 meters up to 45 meters. And again, the rest periods for max speed, so we can get a recovery, so we can get the ATP and the CP system ready to go again, is 10 meters for every 60 seconds, 20 meters for 120, and 45 meters for 180 seconds. So again, on the graphic itself, generally we walk to 45 meters of a rolling start. So that might be, we might start a little gentle jog and then flat out to 45. The rest again is 60 seconds to 180 seconds. Max effort, 100% driving past that cone is very important to make sure we've max effort in every run. Repetitions again is generally 4 to 6, and sets are 1 to 2. So as you can see, the sets are generally smaller than acceleration, because it does take an awful lot out of the system as well. So we need to be very aware of that we're not doing max out sprints for maybe 10 and maybe 3 sets of 10, because we're not getting the max effort and the max acceleration that we require in each of the runs that we're actually doing. So again, something like a skill, are we implementing it in our sessions, or are we putting them into the sessions where we think we should get them? So setting our pitch out for our acceleration and max speed drills are very simple. So if we look down in the bottom corner, we're going to look at our acceleration setups. So that can be basically starting from the end line out to the 21 or out to the 20 meter line. So with the acceleration drills, what we're looking to do is looking to go from a standing start and actually getting off the line as quick as we can out to the 20 meter or out to the 21 meter line. Research has shown that if we do put competition into it, so if you put 2 or 3 players against each other, the intensity and the effort increases as we're all based around competition and getting a winner across the line. So it's a really, really good way of actually getting competition and making sure that the players are given 100% effort on it. It's also vital that players run past the cone. We're looking to get that acceleration speed up as fast as we can. In the top corner, we're looking at max speed or max velocity setup. So again, we're looking at getting a running range of about 45 meters. So with this in mind, we can start with just a walk to the 20-meter line, and then when we hit the 20-meter line, we're at max speed and max velocity out to the 65-meter line. Again, making sure that we're going past the cone as fast as we can, because as there will be loads of time for a recovery, they can walk back to the cone or walk back to the start. It's a really good way to get the rest in and ensuring that they're getting the recovery periods that are required as well. Also with acceleration and max speed, we can introduce the ball. So again, it's another stimulus, very similar to the game for acceleration. So we could get two players to stand at the cone. The coach could drop the ball maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 meters out as if it's a break ball, and each player accelerates as fast as they can towards the ball and to win possession. It's a really, really reactive and an excellent stimulus to get the acceleration drills going really well. Again, coaches can dictate what distance they want the players to do it. Again, can be very, very similar to the max speed, where we can actually place the ball maybe 40 meters out and we're running as fast as we can. The coach can hop it, the player runs into the ball at max speed and then continues to run for maybe 5, 10, 15 meters after that as well. Again, an excellent way to ensure they're getting max speed, max acceleration, and also competition into the session again, and you can also incorporate the ball into the sessions. Another one we can look at is actually speed repeat ability, so the ability to keep going on your actual speed session as well. So as you can see, the pitch setup is very, very simple. You're just looking again from 0 to 45 meters to get there in 6 seconds, and you get 30 seconds recovery. You can do this again maybe in 5 to 6 reps and again in 2 to 4 sets, depending what you want out of the session. So again, this will be kind of maybe very close to the actual season starting in your pre-season, and you're looking to get that real speed ability to get up and down the field as quick as you go on. Very, very important for the transition game that we have now, and it also is incorporated into your acceleration and your speed. So a very, very nice little conditioning thing that can be done at just coming into the season or as a part of your pre-season as well. Very, very useful tool. So maximal aerobic speed, conditioning methods to improve your aerobic capacity. So maximum aerobic speed is used worldwide in all sports to actually help players improve their aerobic capacity. So maximum aerobic speed, or MAS sometimes as it's called, is a test designed to assess the minimum speed that elects VO2 max in players. The amount of time players spend at or above the maximum aerobic speed threshold appears to be a critical factor in improving aerobic power. Aerobic power is an excellent indicator of cardiovascular fitness, which is a critical factor in aerobic performance on all sports, especially field-based sports. So MAS was developed for the purposes of increasing the specificity of training and to enable coaches to monitor training loads more accurately. So what that basically means is that it allows coaches to set time parameters and distances to be covered within the session, so players don't get overloaded or don't get too fatigued. So it means that you can monitor how players are getting on. So if players are getting fitter, they're going to the distance and the time is going to increase. So it's an excellent way to monitor how your conditioning and how your training sessions are actually going. It's very easy to test and retest. It's a 1.2 kilometer timed run, so it's a 100-meter shuttle run up and down the pitch 12 times. It's very easy to calculate. So how we calculate this is we divide the distance by the time in seconds, and that gives us the meters per second. So that gives us the distance that the player is able to cover in a meter per second. So an example of that is 1200 meters divided by 360 seconds. That gives us 3.3 meters per second for that player. So to calculate the distance and the time that player is going to cover within that distance, we multiply 3.3, so the meters per second, by 100% of that player's mass by 15 seconds. So that gives us that player should be covering 49.5 meters in 15 seconds at 100% of mass. So as that player and your program continues, we then increase the actual percentage that player runs at. So we increase it to 110%. So how we work that out is we multiply the meters per second by 110% of that person's mass multiplied by 15 seconds. So overall, that player will increase to 54.4 meters in 15 seconds at 110% of its mass. So again, it's a very, very good way to increase that individual player's fitness base through the times that they're running in the actual sessions themselves. Now, on average, an adult inter-county player covers 4.8 meters per second, and an adult club player covers 3.9 meters per second. So obviously, this can increase and decrease with the player's ability and what point of the season they actually run the mass at. It's something that can be run a number of times during the season to see what the aerobic capacity is of that players and see how the conditioning is going within the sessions themselves. So a really, really good scientifically proven tool to improve aerobic capacity. So there are two types of mass. There's long and short interval mass. So when we're looking at our long interval mass, our long interval mass can last from 1 to 6 minutes. At the intensity, again, you're looking at 80 to 100% of your maximal aerobic speed. Generally, it's done in the off-season and early pre-season. So it's a really good tool that if you've got players coming back that just mightn't be in the best conditioning, you get them in and do their 80% mass to get them ready for their actual longer stuff when they come back in to the group of players. And the tempo is generally work to ratio is 1:1. So if you're working for, we'll say 60 seconds, you're off for 60 seconds. Or if you're working for 15 seconds, you're off for 15 seconds. So again, on your short interval mass runs, you're generally looking from 0 to 60 seconds as a time. Your intensity is running from 100 to 140%. So again, the increase in that is substantial of the distance you're going to have to cover over that period of time. So again, you're coming in here into your max speed, really. You're going as fast as you can to get across the line. When generally late pre-season, and again, it can be done in season if it's programmed correctly. The tempo and the work to ratio you're looking at is 1:2. So you do 1, and then if you do that for 15 seconds, you take 30 off. And again, if you're getting closer up to the 140%, again, you're looking to maybe a work to ratio of 1:4. So again, it's very, very important when you're putting in your short intervals at really high speeds that you're getting your recovery. That's what we're looking for. Again, coming back to our energy systems, we need that ATP and glycolytic system to recover and get ready that you can maximize your run each and every time you actually do it. So the pitch layout for a long interval mass run. So as you can see here as well, you're looking at to complete as many 100-meter runs in 4 minutes. So again, you're looking at your mass runs on your groups. So again, you can group them into two different groups. I would personally say the two groups are better, because it allows you to see where fellas are improving and getting across the line. So one group might have to cover 4,000 meters and another group might actually have to cover 3,900 meters. So again, you're getting the body ready for the more intensive stuff, and you're also improving their aerobic and anaerobic capacities within those runs. So again, generally you do 4 reps within that as well. So that would be if you're doing 1,000 meters within the actual session itself to get up and down the pitch. That would be 4,000 meters that you'll be doing in the actual run in the session itself. Again, that would generally be at 100 to 110% of your maximum aerobic speed when you'll be doing this in pre-season. So again, it's very, very important that it's programmed correctly at the different stages of the season itself. So your short interval mass runs. So this is kind of will be closer to the season in your pre-season, and again can be used sometimes in your actual sessions yourself. These are just examples. So again, in this one we would use 3 groups. So these are all different fellas that done the actual run themselves, the 1.2, and they're just put into different groups. So it allows that there's a bit of competition in the groups. So you're hoping the fellas that are 80 metres are looking to get to 85, and the boys in 85 are looking to get to 90. So again, your interval runs are going to be generally 1:1 on this, but when you increase your intensities to 120, 130, 140% of mass, you'll be looking at a 1:2, 1:3, 1:4. So again, you're looking at your reps as 8, and you're looking at 3 sets. So that can be done throughout the actual session that you're looking to do as well. But what I would say for your high intensity ones, you're looking at getting that into the sessions as early as you can, because you don't want fatigue in that. You want players to be covering the ground that they have to do in that time frame. So it's very, very important that we're programming our MAS runs into where we want them within the sessions themselves. So again, this will be looking at your 17s, your seniors, getting ready for the actual league or the competition that they're going to be doing themselves. So what a session may look at different stages of the season. So within this part, we're going to look at maybe incorporating, again, you're looking at incorporating, this is for kind of 17s, you're looking at your seniors as well. With your underage, you're looking at the majority of it is actually all small-sided games, but also fun games as well that we can get the speed work into it as well. So obviously our Gaelic 15 warm-up can be done with the ball. Very, very important. Has been scientifically shown that it reduces the amount of injuries that is actually out in the season. So it's something that I feel sometimes is neglected, but it's very, very important to get it in early. So at the start of the session, we're looking for acceleration. So we're looking for good arm mechanics, good leg, good nice high knees, all those different aspects of sprinting. Then we're going to go in to do some standing accelerations for 10 and 20 metres, and then maybe some rolling acceleration. So we might have a falling start where we just get the actual players to just lean forward, and then they just accelerate into the actual run itself. So again, anything from 10 to 12 minutes, that can be in that as well. But again, you're incorporating that skill into the session itself. So we go in then to maybe some small-sided games, 6v6 plus or minus, possession-wise. Focus on moving the ball will be within that game itself. Again, that's up to the coach. And again, you're looking at doing that for 6 to 8 minutes, with your rest period's been correct within that as well. Now, our conditioning part goes into our long interval runs. So again, this is kind of early enough in our pre-season. So again, we're looking for our 4-minute run. We're looking at a target of 1,000 to 1,200 metres, and that's 4 minutes. Then after we come out of that, we go back into some small-sided games. So again, we're working on our technical, our tactical part of the session as well, and obviously getting our football in. So again, we're looking at the same as above. It can be 6v6, can be 4v4, can be 8v8, whichever the coach wants. Again, you're looking at your 6 to 8 minutes, and then you're looking to come back into your conditioning run. So again, you're looking at your 4 minutes, your run. Again, you're targeting the same time all the time of your time plus your actual meters that you're looking to cover. So again, you're looking to cover 1,000 to 1,200 meters in that 4 minutes. So again, you come back into your team play. So again, you're looking then at your 10v10s, you're looking at your setups, you're looking at your game, or what you want out of your game, or how you want to set up and how you want to play. Again, can be 12 to 15 minutes. And the last conditioning run is really up to the coach and what part of the pre-season it's at. It can be a nice alternative to change it up, to reduce it or pull it out altogether if the small-sided games and the team play is at the level that the coach requires. But again, this is knowing your team and knowing your players. If the players are very, very fatigued, you're not getting what you want out of that last conditioning run. So it might be an idea to pull it, where you could be picking up some injuries or something like that within the session itself. So sometimes it's a nice motivation factor to say, lads, if the effort is put into the games that we're playing and the other runs, we may pull the last conditioning run. But again, that's up to the coach and what they want to do. So again, we're looking at then going into what we'll say an in-season session may look like. Again, our warm-up with the Gaelic 15 with the ball. Speed focus now is going into acceleration and max speed. So again, 10 to 12 minutes is very, very important. So again, we make sure we're doing our runs at maximal effort with the correct rest periods. Is very, very important. So small-sided games, you're looking at to increase our intensity. So you're looking at 4-on-4, 5-on-5. Again, these are very useful for, we'll say, our full back line and our full forward and getting loads of movement in. Again, you can increase the distances on that as well. Maybe change it up if you want to put your midfielders and your half backs and your half forwards and get some more work done as well. So again, you get into your short conditioning stuff, so your MAS stuff. So again, you're only working for 7 seconds. You might get 8 runs in and your rest period is 30 seconds. So again, you're looking at that really high work in relation to getting your speed up and getting your speed repeatability up as well. So small sided games, again, you're coming back in, you're looking maybe increasing the size of the actual the grids that you're working in. Again, you're looking at 10 to 12 minutes. Conditioning short intervals, again, you may get another one in. This is kind of early in the in-season, so you want to get that speed repeatability into the legs. But again, you're looking at getting that maximum effort in every one of those runs. And then to finish your session, you may go on a 12v12 or 10v10, or whichever way the game in your full conditioning games on what you want to work on for maybe 15 to 20 minutes. Again, these are just examples of how you can actually incorporate all your conditioning tools in the actual sessions themselves. So you're looking at acceleration, your speed work, you're looking at max speed, you're looking at your small sided games, so you're getting your technical, your tactical, your team play into the sessions itself, and you're also getting your aerobic work done at different stages of the season as well. So again, it's very, very important that we plan or even periodize how we're actually going to do each session. So it means that we're reducing that risk of injury and maximizing what we want to get out. And again, we're conditioning towards the demands of the game, as we spoke about earlier in the presentation. So in conclusion, I'm just going to ask all us coaches to think about a few things from the presentation and to see how we optimize the performance of our players. So as coaches, are we coaching to the demands of the game? Are we looking at the corner forward, the half forward, the midfielder, and what distances and what accelerations and what sprints they actually have to do in the game itself through the scientific data that I've just gone through there today? Very, very important that we actually train and coach our players to the demands of the game. There's a great saying out there in sports at the moment: train slow, play slow. Train fast, play fast. So again, is this a mantra that we have to look at as our coaches? So for our question and answers on Monday the 18th, can I ask everybody to please submit the questions on the link within the video description as well. We will send it out on all the social media platforms as well if anybody has any questions on it as well. Again, I would always say, I've always said this, there is no such thing as a stupid question. Please ask, because there might be 4 other people that might be thinking exactly the same way. I would like to thank Andrew and Connacht Rugby for his time in this webinar and workshop, and to the Leitrim Coaching and Games team for all their assistance in putting this together. Again, I would like to thank everybody for coming on, for giving their time. I hope you enjoyed it, and please, if any questions are out there, please send them on. Thank you.